welcome to another D&D Stories, the show where I sit here in front of both of these bookshelves and share all of my gaming stories. Now, topic of the day today is JRPGs, or Japanese role-playing games. Now, I know a lot of people have been asking me lately, which RPGs do I think are best, other than, the obvious tabletop games, Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder. What other RPGs have I played and would recommend to others? And did I have any favorite RPGs from Japan or from America? And what were my preferences on things like that? And I said, well, first, I would have to, remember the divide between Eastern and Western RPGs. And I remember the YouTuber called Gaijin Goomba would explain the difference between Eastern and Western RPGs as this. Western RPGs, he said, are all about choice. They're all about choosing your own adventure, going where you want to, and doing the quests you want to, and reaping the benefits. Primary examples of this would be, Skyrim, World of Warcraft, etc., etc. Places where you've got choices on where you want to go and what you want to do, and there's really no linear path for you to go. There's plenty of choice, plenty of variety, plenty of, I carve my own destiny kind of things. And that Eastern RPGs tend to be focused on a more linear path, contain a lot more repetition, a lot more mastery of skills therein. Now, if you've ever played like a Korean MMO, you see how pretty they are compared to most Western MMOs, but they are very repetitive. They're very bare bones. They're very, kill 50 of this and then come back and talk to me. And, what kind of quest is that? Things like that. There's a lot of repetition, even in regular Japanese video games. That's why rhythm games are very popular in Japan, because they're mastery based. If you make one mistake, then you die, or you make one mistake, you lose that S ranking, and that links down into Bushido, sword fighting. One mistake and you're dead, kind of things. And Western culture, especially in America, is based on exploring the frontier, making your claim on a piece of land, fighting for your freedom and independence. And, it's very, it's East versus West. It's a very different set of cultural norms. So that translates, of course, out into our games. And I thought, well, JRPGs do tend to be more repetitive than Western RPGs. Like you can't compare Skyrim and Persona 4. They're both RPGs, but they're completely different animals. And yet I noticed when I started thinking about my favorite RPGs that those two names were both on the list for very different reasons. Obviously, Skyrim, it's the latest and greatest of the Elder Scrolls series. So, of course, hundreds of hours of exploration, secret finding, book reading, lore, people, enough nude mods to fill a porno shop. The modding community is massive, down to the tiniest grain of sand sparkling, or Star Wars lightsabers instead of swords. The Bethesda was very good about embracing the customizability of something like Skyrim, when there's already, if you wanted to do everything in the game, like 600 some odd hours of gameplay, and I ballpark it that way because, it took me 35 hours just to do the Mage Guild, and that's the only guild that I've ever finished, I think, in Skyrim. And I've never done any of the DLCs, so, which is probably a crime on my part. I should probably do a series on the Elder Scrolls games like I did with the Divinity series. Of course, I still have to play Original Sin, and I've been putting that off because I fucking hate that game. But I digress. Skyrim was good for all those reasons, and Persona, while it is what did my friend call it? He says Persona is the abusive husband of JRPGs. You keep going back to it, and you keep going back to it, hoping something good will happen, and eventually something does, but not before you've spent like 60 hours grinding the same monsters, trying to figure out the same bosses. For those of you that haven't played, I assume most of my viewers have played Skyrim, but Persona 4 was on the PS2 once upon a time, and maybe not as many of you have seen that one. It is a very, very Japanese, very Eastern style RPG. There's a lot of monster grinding. There's a lot of repetitive gameplay. You will get your money's worth in terms of sheer amount of time spent. Because I think by the first time I finished Persona 4, and I got the bad ending, so I didn't get to see the whole game. The first time I finished Persona 4, I clocked out at like 90 hours for a PS2 game, and about 2/3 of that is spent just grinding monsters, and the other third is cutscenes and ball-breakingly hard boss battles. And yet I found Persona 4 up on my favorite RPGs of all time, and I was like, why is that? What did it do? And I was like, well, it's built like an anime, first of all, so I really like that. And then the story was actually quite good, and since there were 5 or 6 different endings, the whole game is based around a murder mystery that involves, dimensional travel and magic and all kinds of other things. It's an anime. So you're given hints throughout the game as to who the murderer actually is, and I won't spoil it because it's a 90-hour game and you got to earn that for yourself. I'm not going to tell you. It's based around a murder mystery, and the game does give you hints along the way as to who it is, but only very subtly. And you're given, the obvious suspect, and there's no way it could be that guy's suspect, and, it might be this person's suspect, and, these people get killed off one after the other, so it can't be them. It's like Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. The top suspect keeps getting killed, and this happens like 6 times. So if by the end of the game, out of the 30 some odd characters that are still left, and there are a lot of characters in this game, out of the 30 some odd characters, if you can figure out who it is based on the events that happened over the past 90 hours, then you unlock like another 20 hours worth of gameplay. I got it wrong, so I got the bad ending. And no, I did, and I saved over it, of course. So I didn't feel like doing another, 90 hours worth of Persona 4 to go back through and pick somebody else, because, I don't go onto like GameSpot or anything, or Game Banshee or Game FAQs or anything, because, what would be the point? No, the murderer is, choose this person and you'll get the good ending. Well, what's the point of me doing it if you're just going to tell me, And yet, like I said, I got the bad ending, and the bad ending is bad. It's like there's no construing it as any kind of good. But Persona 4 was one of my favorite RPGs of all time. I would never play it again. Like I said, and a lot of RPGs tend to be that way when you think about it. Like, once you've played, Tales of Symphonia, you never want to play Tales of Symphonia again, Or if you play, just from my own experience, if you play Divine Divinity or Beyond Divinity, Divinity 2, you don't want to play them again. RPGs have to be long, not only because they're repetitive, but because once you've been told the story doesn't change. That's the way it's going to be, no matter how many times you play it. You can play Super Mario over and over again because, that's Super Mario. It's not nearly as serious. There's no story there, But an RPG is like, it's like a short novel. or sometimes a long novel when it comes to Persona. Once you've read it, you've read it, unless it's just a phenomenal story, like if you want to read Harry Potter over, or if you want to read, Name of the Wind over, or if you want to read, what else do I have on this shelf? I've long since forgotten. If you want to read Wheel of Time over, just those phenomenal books, or Lord of the Rings, better yet. Somebody asked what the giant blue book on my shelf was. It was actually my copy of Lord of the Rings. You can unminimize me and see it now. Yeah, when Lord of the Rings was released, it was supposed to be one book. Strangely enough called The Ring Goes West, but it was arranged into 4 acts, but that's another topic entirely. Persona 4, yeah, Skyrim, obviously, because you can do pretty much whatever the hell you want in Skyrim. Almost to the game's detriment. Like, I like some structuring in my RPGs. One of my other favorite JRPGs, which actually is built more like a Western RPG, is Skies of Arcadia, which was on the Dreamcast and then was ported over to the GameCube. It was I did a crossover review with YouTube username Bluebarian, which I'll put a link to that below if you guys haven't seen it. And Skies of Arcadia was all about exploration and air pirates and, airship battles, and those were my favorite, airship battles. I never saw another RPG with airships in it where you could actually fight with your airships. So I wish someone would make another airship battle game. Even if it's just a complete rip, like they copied and pasted it straight out of Skies of Arcadia, I would still play it and I would still love it. Skies of Arcadia was, strangely enough, a collect the crystals game, but it had enough story around it that there was no, the crystals could have been anything. They could have been rings, they could have been cubes of light, they could have been anything at all, but it wasn't so much the crystals as it was what they controlled, these giant monsters called the Gigas, which were basically weapons of mass destruction, but they were like kaiju, giant creatures that could blow up cities and fight each other and cause meteor showers to rain down from the sky and blow shit up. And whoever had, one of these moon crystals could awaken the Gigas that went with that crystal and cause mass destruction, because that's what they were. They were weapons. But Skies of Arcadia was one of my favorite, and Skies of Arcadia Legends, which was the GameCube port, I think it had like more voice acting and more discoveries, more stuff for you to go find, more subquests, more optional bosses, lots more stuff. And again, my friend Bluebarian will tell you that there's so much in the ways of random battles. You'll just be exploring, and it's like, it's not quite like Final Fantasy VII, but it's closer to Pokemon. When you're wandering in a cave and the Zubats will not fucking leave you alone. It's kind of like that in a lot of places. So you can find items to make that stop. I think it was there were 2 flags that you could put on your airship, a white flag and a black flag. One of them would cause random battles to happen more often, and one of them would cause random battles to stop, like up to a certain point. Like if the enemies were 10 levels higher than you, then yeah, they would still appear. But like on average, if you were just going through the regular part of the world or the early part of the world, you wouldn't get attacked at all, which was a great item to have. So a lot of repetition there, but the airship battles and the storyline in Skies of Arcadia really made up for it. So if you have a GameCube or a Dreamcast still, or an emulator, Skies of Arcadia is high up on my list. What else? Gosh. Skyrim, Skies of Arcadia, Persona, Baten Kaitos. actually. Baten Kaitos was one of those weird hidden gems, and I don't know why it didn't catch on. Probably because of, it lacked any kind of PR. Like Skies of Arcadia didn't get very popular because it came out like right after Final Fantasy VII, so it got overshadowed by the Beast. Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean, and then there's another one called Baten Kaitos Origins, but I never played that one. Eternal Wings and the Lost Ocean was probably one of the longest and one of the prettiest RPGs I've ever played, but at the same time it was kind of too pretty. Like, the art style pushes the GameCube to its limits. Like, I've never seen another game on the GameCube that's that pretty, that is graphically that gorgeous to look at. But that was kind of to the game's detriment because everything looked so pretty, and because it takes place like in a sky land, where there's floating islands, you have to take airships to go everywhere. You couldn't really tell where you could stand. There's docks and there's streets and there's ground, but you could stand on some clouds, and you really couldn't tell because it wasn't isometric, but it was something close to it. The camera would move with you, but the world around you wouldn't move. Kind of like Final Fantasy VII. The world was stationary, but you were not. So the camera wouldn't move, it would just follow you around. Like, not over your shoulder, but from above. So the world was still while the camera followed you around. So it made it very hard to tell what was a ramp and what was like an incline, and what you could go up and what you couldn't. But at the same time, it had one of the most rewarding battle systems I've ever seen in an RPG. It was a card game RPG, don't get me wrong. It was, you would get a deck of cards, everything from armor to weapons to items, spells, mundane things like chickens and milk, bamboo, binoculars, taunting phrases, which would add like a 5% bonus to your attacks, things like that. All of them were cards, and you would have a deck, and each of your characters would have a deck. And, there were numbers on the side, so if you lined up the cards 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 while you were doing a 5-hit combo, then you would do, an extra 25% damage or things like that. And you would try to, late game when you could use like 9 or 10 cards, you would try super hard to do, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way up to 9 with your cards, and it would be a Rising Sun combo that would do like an extra 100% damage, or it would do something, I forget what it was, but you were always vying to line up the numbers to do extra damage, to do the correct element of damage. And then you had armor cards, so whenever you were attacked, you had like 3 seconds to pick the proper armor card. You could defend with a weapon, but it wasn't as good. But you could defend, with armor, with a helmet, with a magical barrier, and they were all on these cards. So you had to balance your deck between weapons and armor and health items and spells and stuff. You had to have like the proper combination to keep yourself alive through battles. And Baten Kaitos boiled down, I thought it was kind of funny at the time, Baten Kaitos boiled down to gathering the pieces of Exodia, pretty much. Basically a set of cards that contain the essence of like a great destroyer, a great god of destruction that almost brought about the end of the world the first time, which is why everybody's living in the sky now. So if he was brought about again, he would destroy all the islands that were up in the sky, and there would be nothing left. So it is we're summoning our evil god kind of RPG. You have to collect the pieces of Exodia before other people do. And there's a betrayal plot. Probably the first betrayal plot in a game that I have ever seen that I didn't see coming, 20 hours before it happened. When it happened, it caught me so far off guard that I didn't know what was going to happen. And in RPGs, let's face it, in RPGs they usually tell you what's going to happen, and then you spend the next 60 hours making it happen. But when this betrayal happens in Baten Kaitos, and guys in the comments, don't say who it is, please, in case somebody takes my advice and goes to play this game. When this betrayal happens, I honestly, the game went right off the fucking rails. I had no idea what was going to happen. And when a game can suddenly do that, and you, the player, have no idea where do we go from here, what are we going to do, whatever the sudden change in, here's the mission, here's what's going to happen, and they don't tell you what it is, it makes for some really interesting gameplay. It's like if you were playing a zombie apocalypse game and they don't tell you, hey, go to this building on 6th Street. They just plonk you in the middle of the city and you've got your gun and 6 bullets and about 50 bazillion zombies, and they're like, okay, have fun. And you're like, well, what the fuck do I do? You figure that out. It's like that. And rare be it that, especially these days with Final Fantasy 13, where it's just the hallway, and I know you know what I'm talking about, the hallway, where they're so set on you fulfilling mission requirements or staying in the hallway or stuff like that. When Baten Kaitos flew off the fucking rails, that was probably some of the best gameplay, not only in that game, but in RPGs in general, when this betrayal plot comes to a head, because you have no idea what to do. In the context of this game, the world is chaotic enough as it is, and of course there's a big evil empire that's pursuing these god cards, and that game is full of Yu-Gi-Oh references. I hope one of my favorite YouTubers, Giant Weibo, I hope he does a Baten Kaitos review someday, because he's a big card game fanatic. And he did a Lost Kingdoms review, and he, poor guy. So I'm hoping he does a Baten Kaitos review sometime, because that's a card game RPG that's actually really good. Strange how, most of the RPGs I'm picking are on the GameCube, because growing up, I had a GameCube and I didn't get a PS2, where all the RPGs were when we were in high school. Were on. That was where Final Fantasy was. That was where most RPGs in general were on the PS2. And the GameCube got a couple of RPGs, but they were actually the really good ones. Skies of Arcadia, Baten Kaitos, Tales of Symphonia, things like that. So, what else? Another JRPG that I liked. I liked Animal Crossing for a few months. I mean, the point of that game was to kind of hang out, and you could get, it wasn't about saving the world. It was about basically crafting a town to your specifications. You would arrive on a train, and you could practically run this game on a Nintendo 64, and it was meant for a Nintendo 64 originally, according to some articles that I've read, but you would get a group of animal friends, and each animal friend would have their own house, and there would only be one kind of fruit in your whole town. You would get peaches or apples or whatever it happened to be, but you could take your memory card and visit somebody else who had Animal Crossing. You could visit their town and meet their town's villagers, and you could grab fruit from his town and bury it in your town, and since it's foreign fruit, it'll grow up into a tree, and that kind of fruit would be worth 500 bells instead of 100 bells. It was a weird kind of currency, and you could collect furniture and old NESs, so you could play old NES games on it, and the seasons would change, so you could catch bugs and dig up fossils and collect coral and fish, and there was absolutely no conflict to it at all. It was more of fill the museum with all the fossils, or find all the furniture from this furniture set, or buy so many things from the store and it will upgrade into a bigger version of that store, or such and such character will only appear at midnight on Friday, on this month, or will if you keep hitting the reset button, then Mr. Rossetti, who's a mole character, will come up and scold you because you're not supposed to hit the reset button. You're supposed to save and then turn the system off properly. It was just a really charming, really silly, kind of relaxing sort of game. And eventually you would get bored of it, because there's no conflict. There's no bad guy, there's nothing to kill. It's just, you can keep upgrading your house to have a basement and a second floor. It was like a very primitive version of The Sims, where you could go out into town and talk to people and exchange letters and wallpaper and carpet. And, once you finished building your dream house, you were kind of done, But, for what it was worth, it was very soothing. It was like watching Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. It was just, it doesn't have to be loud and exciting to be fun. It's kind of like Harvest Moon. Harvest Moon was very good as well. It doesn't have to be loud and crazy and full of people slinging fireballs and fighting dragons to be entertaining. It was something you could sit and relax with, because, none of the animal villagers are going to attack you. Nothing bad is going to happen to you in Animal Crossing other than maybe falling in a pit, and that you're in that pit for all of 5 seconds before you pull yourself out. Ooh. So that was always fun for a completely different reason. But, that's a JRPG. Trying to think, and despite maybe contrary to popular belief, I have not played a lot of the Final Fantasy games. I do have a funny story that goes with Final Fantasy VII, though, as long as I'm talking about it. And, Final Fantasy VII, yeah, I know, everybody's played it, it's probably available on Steam, it's the greatest RPG ever, my waifu, Sephiroth, all that fun stuff, but I actually didn't play Final Fantasy VII until, almost the end of high school. And I played the PC version, which I know sounds strange, but again, I grew up with a GameCube, and I didn't get a PS2 until much later. But I actually had to sneak Final Fantasy VII into my house, because I was friends at the time. I was friends with a guy that my parents did not approve of, because my parents were both very upright, very formal, very, one of them was from the Navy, and one of them was the good farmer's daughter, basically, describes my two parents. So very formal, very, very polite sort of people. Kind of my opposite, because I'm the rebelling teenager. But I had a friend that they did not approve of, because he was very casual. He's a smart aleck, basically, and they didn't like that, and they couldn't punish him for it, so they hated his guts, and they didn't want me to hang out with him. And not just because he was a smart aleck, his father owned a very successful business in town, so he was basically the rich son that could do whatever he wanted, but his family was very, very nice, very casual, very, they felt more real, I guess. They felt like a more natural, more casual, laid-back sort of people. And I was friends with him for this reason, because he was very nice. He's, you couldn't get too close with him, because his smart aleckness, his insults would bite you right in the heart, whether he realized it or not. But he had Final Fantasy VII on the PC, and he lent it to me. He said, yeah, it's great, play it. And this was like the 7 not the 7, like the 4-disc version that was in that big unfolding cardboard envelope thing. And he lent it to me, and I took it home, and I was playing it, and my stepmother came in. I'm in high school. This is just how weird my parents were. I'm in high school, and I'm playing this game, and I think I'm at Shinra Corp or something going up the stairs, and my stepmom asks me where I got this game, and I said, Quentin lent it to me. And that was enough for her to reach over and push the button on my computer to make it spit the CD out, and she put it in the little envelope, and she went downstairs into her office, stuck it in a manila envelope, and drove out into town. I don't know what the fuck her problem was. She drove to my friend's family business, and she stopped in front of the door so that they had to open the door inwards instead of outwards. It was a glass door, obviously, so you flip the little thing, it can flip the other way. Quentin had to open the door inward, and she goes, "Are you Quentin?" And he goes, because he's a smartass, he goes, "Do I want to be?" And she goes, "This is yours." And she gives him the manila envelope and drives off. And yeah, I can hear you scratching your head. What the hell? Can you not borrow games from your friends? Well, apparently not from this guy, or not from freaking Quentin, because my parents hated him so much. And I was like, well, okay, I guess. And then he lent it to me again the next day, and I played it when they weren't around, because apparently I needed to sneak around when borrowing video games from a friend of mine, but I don't know. They didn't approve of him. Ooh. God. No wonder we turned out so differently. But anyway, the fact that it was from him was enough. Anyway, that was my Final Fantasy VII story. And Final Fantasy VII, I think, and this is probably dangerous to say, but whatever, I think the window of relevance for Final Fantasy VII was like starting to close when I got a hold of it finally. Like, I understood it was a classic and everybody had played it and everybody was always yammering about Sephiroth. This was around the time that Kingdom Hearts came out, actually. They said, yeah, Sephiroth's in Kingdom Hearts, isn't that awesome? And I had no context for who Sephiroth was, because I hadn't played it. So when I finally got a hold of Final Fantasy VII and played it, I was like, oh, okay. And then I played it, and I finished, and I was like, well, it really didn't live up to the hype. And it wasn't that I played it on the PC, but, I was like, eh. I liked Baten Kaitos better. I liked Skies of Arcadia. If I had to name a favorite JRPG, it would probably be Skies of Arcadia, if not Persona 4, minus all the 60 hours of grinding. I tell you, I played Persona 4 while, I am chatting with my girlfriend, like when we lived really far apart, because we met over the internets before we moved in together. And we chatted for years and years before we actually met. But I would play Persona 4 while I am chatting with her at night. And that is probably the only way I actually got through that game, because I was doing something else at the same time. And it's like, Persona 4 is a game that you listen to a podcast at the same time, or you turn on the radio, or if you've got a second TV, or if you've got YouTube in the same room, because playing Persona 4 straight up, you would never survive, or you would never finish it. Like, my buddy Bluebarian complained about Skies of Arcadia having a high random battle rate, That's nothing compared to Persona 4. And my God. And yes, the story is phenomenal. And I know I'm going off the rails here. The story is phenomenal. But, man, you had to earn it. That's one of those games where, like, one of your buddies would be trying to convince you, like, oh yeah, dude, like, 20 hours in, it gets really good. Well, I don't want to wait 20 hours. And the only way I got through those 20 hours was like IMing and having YouTube up and listening to Philip DeFranco and Game Grumps and freaking the Completionist at the same time, because you could not play Persona 4 and only be playing Persona 4. You would have to do something else at the same time. You would have to multitask while you were grinding, pretty much, because if you didn't grind and kill every single monster you came across, the bosses would just murder your face in like 2 hits. And a lot of the challenge in Persona 4 actually comes from the bosses, because if you don't, you kind of have to learn their trick. You know, each boss in Persona is like a puzzle, basically. Whether you have to knock them down or you have to put shield on them or reflect on them so they don't heal themselves, they heal somebody else. Or, you know, they'll spend a turn powering up or winding up their big Mach Punch or whatever, and if you're not defending, you're gonna die. No holds barred. Like, it'll do 1,000 damage to all 3 of your party members or instantly KO your healer, things like that. You basically had to, and there were save points before every boss, thank God, because they knew this was going to happen. Because the difficulty is so high, even on normal difficulty. You had to figure out, like, each boss's trick, and then maybe you would beat them. Like, the average boss battle in Persona 4 was like 40 minutes. You know, it was basically like a marathon, even though there was only one boss. Like, you would only be able to damage it when it was knocked down, or you would only be able to damage it like once every 5 turns, or you would have to figure out, it would like pick one of your party members, and if that party member wasn't defending all the time, then it would like shoot a death laser and kill you instantly. Or it would kill that party member instantly and then name another party member who, if they weren't defending all the time, it would death laser and kill them automatically. So that it was very trial and error, but the story was glorious. And, you know, I'm starting to ramble, so I should probably wrap this up. So, favorite RPGs: Baten Kaitos, Eternal Wings in the Lost Ocean, Persona 4, Skyrim. I named one other one, I forgot what it was. Oh well. But those are the top few. I did enjoy other games, like Knights of Pen and Paper is cute, but it's not really any lasting impression. Divine Divinity, despite all of its copying from Diablo, was actually pretty good. I poked fun at it a lot in the review, but that one was pretty good. Divinity Dragon Commander was phenomenal, as long as you like attack, because there's no other strategy, otherwise you get steamrolled. I mean, obviously, I played World of Warcraft for 5 years, and though it has evolved into a completely different animal than it used to be back in the day, you know, Burning Crusade, Wrath of the Lich King, early Cataclysm, that was one of my favorites. So yeah, Persona 4, Baten Kaitos, Skyrim, those kind of games were always my favorites in terms of RPGs. And JRPGs, definitely Skies of Arcadia and Persona 4. And yeah, Pokemon could be in there, but, you know, I had my Pokemon phase as a kid, and then I was kind of done, so I think the last Pokemon game that I finished was Silver, and I tried later games, but it just couldn't hold the interest for me, because it was just the same thing. So, I don't know. I suppose that's all I have to say about that. Favorite RPGs, favorite JRPGs, whatever you want to call that. Coming up on the 100th episode, so I hope you guys will stay tuned for that particular episode of D&D Stories. Keep gaming.